In this video, we're going to review the following word problem. Christine has 2 1/8 yards of fabric, and she cuts 5/6 yards to make a blanket. How much fabric does she have left? So there are 3 different parts, and we're just going to start with this first one. So as you know, I love to draw a picture. Okay, let's say I had 2 1/8 yards of fabric, and I'm going to cut 5/6 of a yard, and I want to know how much I have left. Well, I'm going to subtract those two numbers. But first, I need a common denominator. So we're going to find a common denominator of 6 and 8. So to do that, I'm going to skip count my numbers. So start with your smaller number. 6 times 1, 6 times 2, times 3, times 4, and times 5. Then I'm going to move on to 8 and see if we can find anything they have in common. 8, there's no 8 in my multiples of 6. And then 16, there's no 16. 24, oh, there it is, 24. So my common denominator is 24. So when I do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract. And actually, I'm just going to find equivalent fractions first. 1/8 is equal to something over 24, and 5/6 is equal to something over 24. This is where I use my giant 1 to find my equivalent fractions. Okay, 8 times 3 is 24, so 1 times 3 is 3. And 6 times 4 is 24, 5 times 4 is 20. So now that I have equivalent fractions with common denominators, what I can do is I can then reset up my problem and subtract. So I have 2, and instead of writing 1/8, I'm going to write 3/24. And then instead of writing minus 5/6, I'm going to write minus 20/24. Now, if you look, I have 3/24 minus 20/24. Well, I can't do that, so I have to borrow. I take 1 away from this 2, and then I'm going to add a giant 1 here. But remember, this giant 1, we can make whatever we want. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take this denominator and we're going to put it over here because we want common denominators. And with a giant 1, our numerator and denominator have to be the same. Okay. Now I can take 3 plus 24 and I get 27. And now I can subtract. 27 minus 20 is 7. Denominator stays the same. And 1 minus, this is really 0, right? 1 minus 0 is 1. So Christine has 1 7/24 yards left. We are now going to do the same thing for Jenna, okay? And I should have read this problem before to you, but I've already read it. So Jenna has 4 1/4 yards of fabric, and she cuts 2 2/3 yards of fabric to make a blanket. How much fabric does she have left? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the LCM of 4 and 3. All right, so I found the LCM to be 12. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up fractions to make equivalent fractions using my giant 1 in order to be able to subtract. Okay, so my giant 1s are all set up, so now I can go through and solve. 4 times 3 is 12, and 1 times 3 is 3. And then my giant 1 over here is 3 times 4 is 12, so 2 times 4 is 8. Awesome. So what I can do now is I can go back to my original problem and say, all right, what was my original fractions? 4 1/4. So instead of writing 4 1/4, I'm going to write 4 3/12. And then instead of writing 2 2/3, I'm going to write 2 8/12. And I'm going to subtract. So again, I have this situation where I have 3 minus 8, and I can't do that. So this is 4 is going to become a 3. And that 1 that I took from my 4, I'm placing it over here. And we just want our denominators to be the same. So I'm going to make my giant one 12 twelfths. And when I add 12 plus 3, I get 15. So now I can do 15 minus 8 is 7. Your denominator stays 12. And then 3 minus 2 is 1. So Jenna has 1 and 7/12 yards left. Okay, and the last question is asking us, okay, well, who has more fabric left, Christine or Jenna? How do you know? So when we compare two fractions, we're really looking at, okay, well, and I'm going to try to find a space to do this, and I'm going to block off this space right here to solve this problem. So I have 1 and 7/24, and I'm comparing it to 1 and 7/12. Well, I can think of this two ways. My 24th pieces are going to be smaller. So if I have the same number of pieces, my 24ths are smaller and my 12ths are bigger. So I know that 1 and 7/12 is greater than. But if that's confusing for us, what we can do is we can set this equal to something over 24. My giant one would be 2 over 2, and you get 14. So 1 and 14 24ths, and you're comparing 1 and 7/24. Well, 14 has more pieces, so the answer is Jenna. Jenna has more fabric left. Okay, I know that last part was small and a little bit hard to read, but we'll keep practicing that skill. But really, it's really important to make sure you understand how to find the LCM, find equivalent fractions, and then solve the problems, especially when we're doing subtraction. So rewatch this video if you need to, or come to office hours if you need additional help.